Seoul, Korea. Late at night, the train station stood quiet, bathed in the pale glow of flickering lights. Lee Yeo-un waited as he always did for the last train. He stood casually, yet his eyes drifted repeatedly toward a particular spot, almost as if he were expecting someone. At last, she appeared. The same woman as every night. A short dress clinging to her frame, exposing her legs, makeup perfectly done, and a guitar slung across her back. She took her usual seat. His gaze lingered, studying her as though trying to piece together the fragments of a story he did not know. Night after night, they shared the same train ride home, yet no words had ever passed between them. He wondered why she too was always out so late, though it wasn't really his business. Still, the question gnawed at him. Unable to find an answer, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through the internet, but his attention wandered back to her, inevitably drawn to the guitar on her back. Perhaps she was a musician, or perhaps something else. His thoughts spiraled until her eyes met his, sharp and knowing, as if she had sensed his silent watch. Heat rushed to his face and he turned away quickly. Now she would think he was some kind of creep. Determined to distract himself, he faced the opposite direction. It was probably nothing, pure coincidence, nothing more. He tried to read, but the words slipped away from his focus. He switched to music, slipping an earphone into one ear, letting the familiar rhythm of his favorite song fill the void. It was an uncommon track, one he wished he could share with someone who understood. Then, the sound seemed quieter than usual. Frowning, he adjusted the volume to its highest setting. That was when a sudden voice erupted right beside him, loud and sharp. A startled jolt ran through him. It was her. The girl glanced at his startled expression, her voice calm yet cutting through the moment, telling him to lower the volume of his music. It was then he realized the truth. His earphones hadn't even been connected to his phone. The embarrassment that washed over him was beyond words. 1,000 thoughts fired through his mind, cursing the cheap earphones, cursing his carelessness, and drowning in the weight of his own humiliation. Through a while she returned, her steps unhurried, and stopped near where he sat. With casual ease, she asked if he liked the music. He muttered a yes, still recovering from the awkwardness. Then she spoke the title, Long Afternoon. The name lit him up instantly. His joy surged uncontrollably, shattering the awkward distance between them. He rushed to her side, unable to hide his excitement. At last someone real, shared this rare connection. He asked again, almost desperately, to make sure he'd heard right. Her answer was exactly what he wanted to hear. And just like that, the conversation spilled open. He talked about the song with unfiltered enthusiasm, his words flowing faster than he realized. For once, he wasn't glancing at her shyly from the corner of his eye. His attention was consumed entirely by the music, by the meaning it carried for him. If the artist ever held a concert, he imagined the crowd, the energy, the thrill of being there. He imagined people finally recognizing the artist's face, yet when she asked if he truly wanted that, he shook his head. The mystery was part of the magic. Yes, he was curious, but he admired the artist's way, unmoved by fame, devoted entirely to creation. She lowered her head slightly, hiding her expression, a faint smile tugging at her lips. The kind of smile that held a secret. One might have thought she was the artist, or perhaps someone who knew them far too well. She broke the silence first, her voice carrying the weight of casual curiosity, as if it had been on her mind for a while. She noted how often they seemed to cross paths at the station. The timing was uncanny, right as the distant hum of the arriving train began to fill the air. He tried to brush it off, feigning ignorance, believing himself clever enough to hide behind a casual denial. But she dismantled his composure with a single remark. She had noticed. She knew. Every glance, every fleeting stare, she had known all along. That night left its mark on him. The next day, work felt like a cage. His thoughts kept circling back to that moment on the platform, until the pressure boiled over and he blurted out a frustrated groan that echoed across the office. His boss, Ms. Oyuju, looked up with concern at first, then with mild annoyance when she realized it wasn't the crisis she expected. He told her what had happened, words tumbling out in embarrassment and unease. What if she thought he was some kind of creep? But Ms. Oyuju dismissed the idea with a wave, pointing out that if the girl truly minded, she wouldn't keep returning to that same seat night after night. Her advice was simple: speak to the girl next time, clear the air, maybe even let it lead somewhere more. She smirked, tossing in a teasing remark about romance that he instantly rejected. Love? No. He had no space for that. Not now. His boss only leaned into the joke, her persistence grating on his nerves until he drowned himself back in work, though his thoughts refused to settle. When the day was done, he found himself back on his familiar path, the night air carrying him toward the station for the last train. This time, his resolve was clear. He would apologize, not because of guilt, but because he didn't want misunderstandings to take root. She was, after all, the only person he could imagine sharing his love for that rare song with. Standing before the station's quiet glow, his mind wavered between doubt and anticipation. He could only hope she thought the same. He arrived at the train station only to be met with an unexpected sight. Someone was sprawled across the seat he always claimed as his own. A stranger, fast asleep, occupying what he had silently marked as his spot. And there she was, already seated nearby. But with the man blocking his usual place, his carefully imagined plan to start a conversation with her crumbled before it could begin. Of all nights, it had to be now. What he didn't realize was that she had already glanced his way, just briefly, before turning forward again, her thoughts drifting elsewhere. Resigning himself, he chose to stand, pulling out a book as a cover, eyes fixed on the pages but mind still wandering toward her. He told himself he wouldn't speak to her. Not tonight. He would simply wait for the last train to arrive and let the moment pass. But fate had other ideas. A voice broke through his thoughts, cutting cleanly into his self-imposed silence. She was speaking to him, asking if he was really going to stand there waiting for the bus. The bus? He turned, giving a short, almost automatic answer, but she pressed again, making sure he knew what he was saying. There was still time before the train would come. Now, his earlier resolve began to falter. He mumbled that there was nowhere to sit. Without hesitation, she told him to sit beside her. For a moment, his mind went blank. Was she serious? Yet before he knew it, he was lowering himself into the seat next to her. Until the last train arrived, he would be right there, beside her. And he could hardly believe it. The girl's lips curved into a faint, knowing smirk. He liked long afternoon, that much she had already confirmed, so she decided he was worth sparing the seat beside her. He still seemed caught in a daze, hesitant, as though he couldn't quite believe the offer. She glanced at him, her smirk lingering, recalling how the last time they had boarded the train, they had sat together. He drew in a steady breath, then another, promising himself he would only sit for a short while. Carefully, he lowered himself into the seat, leaving a noticeable gap between them, a safe distance, or so he believed. Her gaze shifted from him to the space he had created, amusement flickering in her eyes. She steered the moment into conversation, her voice light but curious. He explained that his nights were often late, the result of working the evening shift at a cafe, hours that left him walking into the night more often than not. She smiled faintly, as if that had been the answer she was expecting. Encouraged, she asked another question, her tone still laced with casual interest. Yes, he was in university, he admitted, though shyly. She remarked, almost to herself, that it must be exhausting. Then his turn came. Taking the chance, he asked the question that had lingered in his mind. Did she, too, return home late from work? Her answer, however, caught him completely off guard. She claimed to handle men with peculiar taste, calling them her clients. The words dropped into the air like bait, and his mind took them exactly as she intended, his imagination darting in all the wrong directions. From the corner of her eye, she caught his shifting expression and smiled again, this time more brightly, almost triumphantly. Then, with deliberate clarity, she unraveled the truth. Her cryptic metaphor had simply been about music. She worked at a studio. Relief washed over him so suddenly it was almost tangible, his body nearly leaning toward her in a reflexive release of tension. She went on to explain the demands of managing the studio, the endless tasks, the long hours that kept her out late. Beads of sweat formed along his brow as he echoed her words back to her, as if reaffirming them for himself. She studied him with a raised brow, silently questioning what, exactly, he had been thinking earlier. He denied everything, averting his gaze, cheeks flushed and damp with nervous heat. Her smirk returned, tinged with a sense of victory. With the conversation flowing again, she asked how he had discovered long afternoon, considering his schedule left little time for exploring new things. She was still speaking when he cut in, not harshly but with quiet correction. Not scout but uncover new things, he thought. And just like that, his mind began to drift back into the past. Flashback. He lay sprawled on his bed, his body heavy and unmoving. A harsh cold had pinned him down, stealing away the strength for work or school. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, its silence pressing in on him. Living alone, moments like this made the loneliness heavier. To break the stillness, he decided to play some music, something to breathe life into the air. His fingers had wandered aimlessly through his playlists, searching for something, anything, to fill the emptiness. That was when he found it. Long afternoon. End of flashback. The memory lingered as he returned to the present, stealing a glance at her before lowering his gaze, scratching the back of his head with nervous restraint. He couldn't help but wonder what she thought of him now. Till the story pushed forward from his lips. First, it had been the melody that caught him, a delicate arrangement that wrapped around his senses like a quiet embrace. But as he listened again and again, it was the lyrics that truly captured him, drawing him into a deeper world he hadn't expected. Her eyes followed him as he spoke, though she hadn't anticipated such depth from him. The air between them felt lighter, more open. His curiosity stirred again, and he asked about her own favorite song from the artist. She turned away slightly, answering with the same title he had just mentioned, and then another. Tidal Flow. At the sound of it, his eyes lit up. The energy in his voice rose, words tumbling out as he praised the artist's style with an excitement he could barely contain. She gave a subtle nod in agreement, a faint sheen of sweat forming on her brow as she kept pace with his enthusiasm. He was still in mid-thought when the sound of the arriving train broke their rhythm. Time had slipped through their fingers without them noticing. She rose to her feet, ready to leave, but paused, just for a moment, as if weighing whether to say something. Her gaze met his, and she spoke softly, almost as if it were a secret. Long afternoon would be happy to hear every word you've said, especially about the lyrics. His cheeks warmed, a shy smile tugging at the corners of his mouth as his eyes dropped to the ground. He wanted more of this conversation, wishing the moment could stretch just a little longer. As she stepped toward the train, he found himself calling after her, offering his name. She hesitated, then gave hers with a gentle smile, Hae-in. Before disappearing into the train's open doors, she left him with a parting note. The next time they crossed paths, he had better greet her or be ignored for life. His chest swelled with a boyish squeal of affirmation, promising he would. And with that, they both boarded the train, the night carrying them toward their separate destinations. In her apartment, Hae-in had just stepped out of the bathroom, steam still clinging to her skin. She let out a small laugh, as if recalling something amusing, while gently drying her damp hair with a towel. Moving to her bed, she sat down, still rubbing away the lingering droplets, but her mind was far from the room. Her thoughts wandered to Yeo-un, back to that moment on the train before their conversation had even begun. She had been scrolling through her phone, only to be interrupted by the sound of loud, uneven snores. Turning her head, she found the source, a man slumped over, drooling in his sleep. Something on the floor caught her attention, a wallet lying just within reach. It had to belong to the sleeping man, but leaving it there was far from safe. She was still deciding what to do when someone else stepped forward. Without hesitation, Yeo-un bent down, picked up the wallet and slipped it back into the man's pocket. Then, with a faint smile of satisfaction, as though he had just won a small, private victory, he walked away and sat down. She couldn't help but smile, leaning her head back. He hadn't even considered how it might look, hadn't worried about being mistaken for a thief. He had simply done what was right. Now lying on her bed, still wearing her jacket for reasons even she couldn't explain, her thoughts circled back to him. Yeo-un, and the surprising revelation that he was a fan of Long Afternoon. She could still picture his expression as he spoke about the music, bright, alive, and utterly unguarded. She shifted under the covers, her mind drifting further. If he admired Long Afternoon so much, would he admire her too if he knew she was Long Afternoon? The thought was warm, almost exciting, until another vision intruded. A wave of faceless critics, laughing at her, flooding the world with cruel, false comments. The sudden image made her sit upright in bed. What a foolish thing to imagine. People loved the music, not the person behind it. Reaching for her phone, she stared at the work she had created. Didn't matter if someone else stole the spotlight. As long as people listened, as long as the songs reached them, that was enough. With that quiet conviction, Hae-in lay back down, letting the weight of the day slip away, and slowly drifted into the soft embrace of sleep. Hae-in sat in the quiet music studio, reclining on a chair with her iPad in hand. She had just finished a drawing, her eyes scanning over every detail, deciding whether it would be worthy of her next post. Her focus was deep, almost lost in thought, when faint voices spilled out from one of the side rooms. Turning her head, she caught sight of them, two men emerging from the direction she suspected. They confirmed her assumption with their presence, one of them glancing her way with an air of hesitation. There was something in his demeanor, as if he had been waiting for a chance. After a brief exchange, he made his request, to reserve the same room for the following Monday at the same time. She agreed without much thought. But then, with a nervous breath, he revealed his true intention. He wanted to connect, perhaps through her number, perhaps through social media. He claimed he had always wanted to talk to her. Yet, his courage was met with polite refusal. His face flushed, and he retreated, his friends teasing making his embarrassment worse. Hae-in could only sigh. She turned her attention to tidying up when the studio door opened again. This time it was her uncle. He had arrived earlier than expected, offering his reasons with an almost casual tone. But then, with a mischievous smirk, he brought up the man from moments ago, suggesting that the stranger seemed like her type. His teasing was met with her deflection, yet he pressed on. She finally admitted the truth. It wasn't about the man. She disliked the band he was part of. That alone was enough to end any thought of further conversation. Her uncle's laughter filled the room before he waved her off, telling her to head home. The session scheduled for later that day had been cancelled. A spark of joy lit up within her. She had been yearning to practice some new songs, and now time was finally on her side. But just as she began to gather her things, her uncle returned, as if remembering something. From his bag, he produced a small, neatly wrapped package. A gift. It was for White Day, a gesture for her to enjoy with coffee during late-night songwriting sessions. She accepted it with quiet gratitude, the thoughtfulness warming her heart. Her gaze lingered on the gift for a moment, and an idea began to take shape. She asked if she could stay and practice. His answer was simple: she could do whatever she liked. A small smile curved her lips. Now, with the studio all to herself, she had the perfect chance to immerse herself in music for as long as she wanted. After the lights went out at work, Yeo-un bid his boss farewell, eager to head home. His boss, wearing that familiar mischievous grin, tossed a teasing remark his way, a sly comment about enjoying a romantic journey back. Yeo-un could only sigh, unsure how to deal with his boss's constant jokes. At the train station, exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Dropping into a seat, he let his body sink into the hard bench and pulled out a book. The holiday had been his chance to raise his scores, but reality was proving otherwise. His tired eyes drifted across the pages until a presence approached. When he looked up, she was there, Hae-in. She carried a small, neatly wrapped gift in her hands. His gaze lingered for a moment, curiosity sparking, but he quickly turned away. She took the seat beside him, the faint sound of wrapping paper rustling as she began to open her gift. In his mind, he found himself wondering how many people must be drawn to her. She was striking, the kind of presence that seemed to collect attention without even trying. Still, he told himself it wasn't his business. The soft scent of sweets drifted from the open box. She held it casually, and after a brief exchange of glances, she extended the gift toward him. It was an unexpected gesture, one that made him hesitate. He scratched his head, unsure if he should accept it. She insisted, claiming it would go to waste otherwise, but he still questioned the thought behind it. Then it hit him. If it had been given to her by a man, the idea didn't sit right. His sudden suspicion drew a pause between them. She met his gaze, unbothered, and with a hint of a smug expression, revealed that it was from her uncle. Relief washed over him instantly, his earlier doubts vanishing. Without hesitation now, he took the gift, examining it with almost childlike enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Hae-in watched him quietly, her expression soft but amused, the faintest thought lingering in her mind. What a fool! When he opened the gift, he asked her about it, but she had no idea. She only mentioned that she'd never tasted it herself, only that it was handmade caramel, pure sugar, she claimed, good for clearing the mind and sharpening thought. He studied the small, golden piece with suspicion, as though it were some rare artifact rather than candy. Lifting one from the box, he inspected it closely, his curiosity deepening with each passing second. Then, as if struck by an idea, he turned toward her, asking her to taste it, using her uncle as a leverage. She seemed to consider for a moment, weighing the thought in her mind. Her uncle would surely ask her opinion of the caramel the next day, and perhaps he wouldn't be pleased if she hadn't tried it. Eventually, she decided to taste it after all. But instead of reaching out to take it, she simply closed her eyes and parted her lips, waiting. The sight left him momentarily frozen, caught between confusion and rising nervousness. Her explanation came simply. Her hands were greasy from tuning the guitar. Feeding her, it seemed, was the only way. He hesitated, trying to persuade her otherwise, but she remained still, insistent. Beads of sweat gathered on his brow as he slowly unwrapped the caramel, placing it gently between her lips. She bit down, chewing thoughtfully, until her face suddenly twisted in surprise. With a burst of laughter, she spit it out, claiming it was far too sweet, and urged him to try one himself. Before he could protest, she slipped a piece into his mouth. The sugar hit instantly, an overwhelming rush that made him want to spit it out as well, but he held it in, forcing a smile. Sweet, painfully sweet. She laughed, suggesting it would be better paired with bitter tea or coffee, and he could only agree. They stayed there, side by side, trading quiet glances and light laughter as they waited for the train. The next morning, he was still tangled in the warmth of sleep when his alarm cut through the silence. His limbs felt heavy, his eyes reluctant to open. With nothing else to eat, he reached for the caramel she had given him the day before. One bite, and the overpowering sweetness jolted him fully awake. A sudden chime pulled his gaze to his phone. A new notification. Long Afternoon had just uploaded something. That name stirred something warmer, something deeper, far more pleasant than the lingering taste of sugar. At work, Yeo-un was unusually radiant. He moved between tables with effortless cheer, serving customers despite the overwhelming rush. He was always pleasant, but today there was something different. When the shop finally emptied enough to allow a breath, his boss took the opportunity to satisfy her curiosity. She had noticed his mood. It was far too light to ignore. The reason, it turned out, was simple in his mind but baffling to hers. His favorite musician had posted on Instagram. The mere possibility of a new song sent him into quiet reverie, his eyes closing as though in a silent prayer for the perfect melody. Her sigh cut through the air, her face sore. She had expected something more significant. Perhaps progress with that mysterious girl he always encountered on the last train. The thought drew a smirk from him. No, nothing like that. Just curiosity, he insisted. But his boss was unconvinced. She imagined the possibility of feelings developing, imagining a movie scene, only to frown when she learned he hadn't seen the girl in days. That was when a detail surfaced, almost as an afterthought. They had exchanged names. And on White Day, she had given him caramel. That stopped her cold. Caramel. On White Day. Her reaction was immediate, too animated for her usual self. She pressed for details, urging him to recount the moment. He explained simply. He told her his name first, then asked for hers. From there, his boss's mind spun its own romantic scene. She pried further, hoping for some gesture of thanks from him, a drink, a gift, anything. But there was nothing more. No follow-up. No spark of drama to feed her imagination for the night. She was visibly deflated. He was visibly frustrated. His life, he thought, was not meant to be her source of amusement. To her, it wasn't that deep. There was nothing different between them after all. She even offered to tell him another story, but he had no interest. And then the door opened. A customer stepped in, brim of a hat casting a shadow over his face. His voice was quiet but clear as he ordered a cappuccino. A simple transaction, nothing more. Yet as the man turned away to wait, something tugged at Yeo-un's memory. He had seen that face before. But where? He remained frozen, eyes fixed on nothing, his expression clouded with confusion. Across the counter, His boss caught the distant look on his face and followed the subtle motion of his hand toward a man seated by the window. Relief softened her features as recognition dawned. Sung Hyun-jae, one of the most famous singers in the country. Here, in their quiet little cafe, the realization hit him like a rush of cold air. His chest tightened with excitement, though he stifled any outward reaction, unwilling to look foolish in front of someone so renowned. Only now did the familiarity click. He had seen that face countless times, framed by glowing stage lights and camera flashes. Hyun-jae, however, seemed perfectly at ease, his presence as natural as any other customer. A warm smile accompanied his coffee order, and for a fleeting moment it felt as if the cafe itself basked in a rare kind of grace. When he finally rose to leave, the atmosphere seemed lighter, though the impression he left lingered long after the door closed behind him. Sighed, Hyun-jae slipped into his car but didn't drive away immediately. The world beyond the windshield blurred as he sipped his coffee in unhurried silence. His phone rested in his hand, the name Long Afternoon glowing faintly on the screen. He had been following the artist's work for some time, drawn in by the singer's unique style, poetic lyrics, and vivid imagery. As the idea of a future collaboration took root, he started the engine and disappeared into the night. Later, Yeo-un walked to the train station, his steps quiet, his thoughts elsewhere. They circled inevitably back to her, Shin Hae-in. He wondered if she had seen the latest update from Long Afternoon's Instagram page. In his mind, he pictured the two of them reacting together, their shared excitement spilling over into endless speculation. The thought warmed him in a way that little else could. To share something you love with someone who understands it, that was a rare and precious thing. As the station lights came into view, he caught himself hoping almost desperately that she would be there. He arrived at the train station and went straight to the spot where they usually sat, but she was nowhere in sight. His shoulders drooped. She wasn't there again that day. Maybe they were too busy at the studio where they worked and her schedule had changed. Or, his chest tightened, maybe she hated his reaction to the gift she'd given him on White Day and had decided to avoid him altogether. Frustration welled up and he muttered under his breath, "I had high hopes for nothing." A soft chuckle broke the air, followed by a familiar voice asking what had disappointed him. He turned sharply, eyes widening in shock at the sight before him. It was her, Shin Hae-in. He had wanted to see her so badly, yet now that she stood there, a strange mix of relief and surprise swept over him. For a moment, he tried to keep his composure, greeting her as if nothing stirred beneath the surface. It had been days since they last crossed paths, and he had quietly feared she would not appear again tonight. Her presence carried an unfamiliar energy. There was something different. Her face was faintly flushed, her movements loose, almost unguarded. In that instant, the truth struck him. She was drunk. She confirmed it with a playful sway, standing straight like a child trying to appear proper, before laughing softly and attempting to explain herself. She had been celebrating, something important, something she had worked on for a long time and had finally completed. She moved to sit, holding her head as a wave of dizziness overtook her. He wanted to know what her achievement was, but she pressed a finger to her lips, sealing the secret with a teasing smile. His gaze lingered on her longer than he intended, until he forced himself to look away, heat rising in his own face. She looked far too adorable in that moment and far too beautiful. Desperate to change the current of his thoughts, he began speaking about Long Afternoon's recent post on Instagram, eager to share his excitement. But just as the words began to take shape, the station's announcement cut through the air. The train was approaching. Frustration clawed at him. This wasn't enough. He hadn't even begun to say what he wanted, and soon the noise of the train would drown everything out. He racked his brain for a solution, muttering his thoughts under his breath. This was not how he had imagined the night unfolding. All the while, Hae-in simply watched him in silence, her expression unreadable. Then, like a sudden spark, an idea struck. He suggested they have another round of drinks together, just the two of them. Her eyes widened, the flush on her cheeks deepening, surprise flickering across her face. But before her answer could escape her lips, another announcement echoed through the station. The train pulling in was the last one for the day. And with that, the moment slipped away slowly, leaving him standing there, unsure whether fate was playing with him or simply against him. He was still wondering what to do when realization struck. He had been trying to prolong the moment, to spend more time with her. In his mind, he saw how it might have appeared, like some stranger clumsily hitting on women, the kind that would make Shin-hae frown in distaste. The thought made him want to apologize immediately. But before the words could form, she rose from her seat and closed the distance between them. With a calm, unreadable expression, she told him they could go for a drink. There was no clear reason for it, only that she didn't want the moment to end. Train arrived, its brakes screeching softly against the rails. They stepped inside together. His heart was light. The simple prospect of sharing a drink with her was enough to lift every shadow from his mood. Inside, the carriage was filled with people absorbed in their own worlds. Shin-hae seemed no different, quietly seated beside him. Yet not far from her was Yeo-un, his posture stiff and his gaze flickering toward her in stolen glances. His mind felt like a storm. Every small sway of the subway brought his shoulder brushing against hers, each touch sending a faint heat to his face. He tried to calm himself, though it was difficult. It had been so long since he had shared a drink with anyone, and the anticipation made him feel almost boyish. At some point, her voice pulled him from his thoughts. She asked where he lived, and upon hearing his answer, casually suggested they drink there instead. Only then did it strike him, if she was coming to his home, he should also make sure she could return safely. But his wallet wasn't exactly prepared for such responsibility. Awkwardly, he scratched his head and offered to return her fare. She dismissed it with a small smile, saying it was fine since he would be paying for the drinks anyway. Then, with a faint smirk, she added that he would have to take care of her if she drank too much. The words lingered in his mind. Take care? The meaning was unclear, and yet her gaze seemed to carry something unspoken. Leaning ever so slightly toward him, she lowered her voice, close enough for only him to hear. She told him that slept naked when she was drunk. And in that fleeting moment, a wave of uncertainty washed over him. She looked at him with a playful smile, her expression softening before revealing that she had only been teasing. Almost at the same moment, an announcement echoed through the station, signaling the next stop. They stepped off the train together and began walking in the direction of his home. As they moved along the quiet streets, Hae-in's eyes wandered over the unfamiliar surroundings, her gaze thoughtful, as if committing every detail to memory. She asked if she had ever been in this part of the city before, but his reply revealed something else. It was the path leading to his small one-bedroom apartment. The thought seemed to linger in her mind, and he caught the faint expression on her face. A flicker of hesitation passed through him. Perhaps inviting her there wasn't the best idea. Quickly, he suggested they find somewhere else, a neutral place where they could drink comfortably. With a light smile and an air of trust, she followed him without question. But when they arrived, the place was closed for the week, a simple handwritten note on the door displaying a phone number for inquiries. He stood there, unsure of what to do next. The phone in his hand became a prop, something to hide his uncertainty as he muttered apologies. He hadn't known the place would be closed. Yet Hae-in didn't seem upset. In fact, she laughed softly at his flustered state, her amusement only deepening his embarrassment. Determined to salvage the evening, he claimed he would look for another spot and began scrolling through his phone. But in truth, it was nothing more than a pretense. He didn't know where else to go, and to make matters worse, the sluggish internet connection only fueled his frustration. He didn't want the night to slip away. He had looked forward to this moment, to the simple joy of sharing a drink with her. Sensing his uncertainty, Hae-in stepped closer. There was something in her expression, an idea forming. Yeo-un glanced up, curious but wary. Her gaze held a quiet mischief, and as she spoke, his heartbeat quickened. He already suspected where this was going. Then she said it outright, his place. The words settled between them like a subtle challenge. And though he considered resisting, something in the moment made refusal impossible. So they walked on, the streets dimly lit, the silence filled with unspoken thoughts. His mind was a tangle of images and possibilities, each step bringing them closer to the door he wasn't sure he wanted to open. When they arrived at his place, she stepped inside with an expression of mild amazement. The apartment was neat, organized, almost inviting. He caught her reaction and felt a quiet sense of pride, thankful he had cleaned the place just a week earlier. Without that effort, it might have been a disaster. She moved further in, glancing around, before turning sharply with a question that seemed to come out of nowhere. Seating herself casually on the floor, she studied him with a steady gaze. She had a question. She wanted to know if he had a girlfriend. Question lingered in the air, personal, unexpected. His nervousness brought further probing from her. She didn't want to be classified as a mistress. He answered with honesty, and in that moment she seemed to relax, as though a silent weight had lifted. The atmosphere grew lighter, though curiosity pulled him to ask her the same. Her reply, however, was different, claiming she had a boyfriend. A foreigner, she said, skilled in music and fighting. The words sank into him with a twinge of disappointment. If that were true, then what they were doing now felt wrong. Two people, alone, drinking together, crossing a line that should not be crossed. She noticed the shift in his expression and laughed. The truth slipped out. It had been a lie. Relief washed over him, his breath leaving in a quiet exhale. She explained that the person she described was real, just not her boyfriend, teasing him for not catching the joke. He felt a flush of embarrassment. How could he have known? Her laughter carried through the room as she apologized. Somehow, his thoughts spilled out, unguarded, a quiet worry about unintentionally hurting someone. She didn't quite grasp his meaning, but in her own way, she brushed it aside, lifting her drink toward him in a silent invitation to toast. Her expression was confident, her voice certain, no one would be hurt. Till he sought one last confirmation. Her answer was clear, her smile steady. Their glasses met with a soft, ringing chime, the sound marking the beginning of a night neither of them could yet define. After several rounds of drinking, their conversation drifted toward the topic of long afternoon. He spoke with a confidence that bordered on certainty, determined to prove his point. His phone became his weapon, his fingers scrolling endlessly as he searched. At last, he found it. A burst of triumph escaped him as he rose from the floor, reading aloud the post he had discovered. It was more like interpreting the post he saw. His excitement filled the room, she silently thought to herself. She did not know that her post carried something, even though he interpreted one wrongly. She hadn't meant to make it so obvious, not to him at least. To his satisfaction, Hae-in's expression confirmed something. She also couldn't wait for the song to be released. He sat back down, the thrill still alive in his face and voice as he spoke about the song's expected release in April. He couldn't wait for it to come out and imagined the excitement it would bring. But to her, the truth was different. As long afternoon, she had no such plans. The song was finished, but its release was nowhere in her immediate schedule. The alcohol was beginning to blur the edges of their thoughts. It was showing in their words, in their laughter, in the way the conversation began to slip. He studied her for a moment, an observation taking shape in his mind. Her tone, it was so similar to long afternoon. Almost identical. She took a slow breath, quietly hoping he wouldn't piece it together. Then, just as quickly as the thought had come, he brushed it aside with a laugh. No, she couldn't be long afternoon. In his mind, long afternoon was far cooler, untouchable. She exhaled, relieved. Talk circled back to his admiration for the artist. It was clear he could go on about her endlessly. She hadn't expected him to talk about long afternoon the whole night, yet she found herself appreciating it. At least it wasn't a heavy conversation about feelings. Their laughter filled the room once again. But as the minutes slipped by, fatigue began to creep into her body. She mentioned that he could keep talking while she lay down, promising to listen. He refused instantly. If she lay down, it would feel like watching a live ASMR video, soft, soothing, and guaranteed to lull someone to sleep. A playful smirk touched her lips. Then she made a suggestion. What if it were the other way around? He could be the calming presence while she slept. His composure faltered, a restless unease rising within him. And then she said it plainly. She wanted to sleep there in his home. His breathing quickened. The night had already taken more turns than he had prepared for, and now the line between anticipation and uncertainty had never felt thinner. She did not wait for his reply before climbing onto the bed, her eyes still locked on him. Question about staying at his place hung in the air, but he brushed it aside with a casual gesture and a passing remark. Before he could finish speaking, she suddenly rose from the bed and leaned close, her face inches from his. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, as she reminded him that everything he said carried weight, but only to her, never to an outsider. Caught him off guard. For a moment, she had him completely hooked. Then, just as quickly, she pulled away and sat upright, her composure returning. He was left in quiet confusion, his mind filling with countless possibilities, each thought more vivid than the last. But before he could settle on any of them, she broke through his spiraling thoughts. She had already decided, whether he liked it or not, she would stay. She lay back down as if sealing the decision. He didn't protest. Tomorrow was his day off, and there were still conversations left unfinished. Her lips curved into a smile, followed by a small laugh. Then she sat up again, her hands moving toward the zipper of her trousers. His eyes narrowed in uncertainty, trying to read her intentions. The moment the zipper shifted, panic flared in him. His mind jumped too far, too fast. But she only looked at him with mild surprise, revealing the truth. She had simply loosened the button because her stomach was uncomfortably full. She even showed him the undone button as proof. His tension dissolved into embarrassment. How foolish he felt. Trying to make amends, he offered to find her something more comfortable to wear. The suggestion lit up her face. He rose and moved to the wardrobe, searching for an old pair of loose trainers. But before he could pull them out, a faint sound drew his attention, a soft, disappointed sigh. He turned to see her holding an empty can. It had been the last one. Without hesitation, he offered to step out and buy more, and she approved with an infectious burst of laughter. Something about that moment, simple, light, and genuine, made her smile linger. He suggested she change clothes while he was gone, and she gave a shy, almost playful nod, agreeing without a word. As he was about to step outside, something made him glance back. A question lingered. Did she need anything? She assured him she had almost everything in her bag, almost. There was one thing. Her voice faltered, her hand brushing her lips as if trying to make the words sound casual. It was nothing unusual, yet speaking it aloud to him felt strangely awkward. He left the house, the unspoken request circling in his mind. The convenience store lights welcomed him, and with a quiet certainty, he went to the aisle he thought she meant. Pads. That must be it. His fingers hovered over the shelves, but he hesitated. Which one was good enough? He sighed, unsure. Then his gaze drifted just slightly to another section. Condoms. For a fleeting moment, the thought crossed his mind. Could she have meant that? He shook his head, silently chiding himself for even considering it, till denying that the thought had taken root would be a lie. Hae-in was beautiful, effortlessly so. Kind. Warm. And there was something about her that pulled at him in ways he couldn't control. His hand reached out, almost unconsciously, fingers brushing the box as if testing the weight of the thought itself. He reminded himself to be careful. His feelings had already been too strong once before, and it had cost him. But just if she had truly wanted something like that, could he have said no? The memory of seeing her at the train station stirred something deep within him, pure happiness shadowed by a growing, restless frustration. He could hardly steady himself, the push and pull of emotions threatening to unbalance him. It was time to leave. Time to go home. On his way home, his mind remained restless, thoughts scattered like leaves in the wind. When he finally stepped inside, she was already asleep. She was already wearing something more comfortable, her jacket cast aside. It was clear she had lain down without much thought. Perhaps exhaustion had claimed her quickly, or perhaps something had been weighing on her mind. Worried she might catch a cold, he quietly took a blanket and moved to her side. As he leaned closer to cover her, her eyes fluttered open, slow and heavy. He thought she was still half lost in dreams until, without warning, her hand reached for him, pulling him down, closer and closer still, until their faces were almost touching. His heartbeat faltered. Her laughter, soft yet unguarded, filled the quiet room, and in that moment her drowsy smile carried a dangerous sweetness. It was enough to unsteady him entirely. But just as suddenly she stretched lazily on the bed, her breathing evening out again. Sleep had reclaimed her. Only then did he realize she had been sleep-talking. And yet the echo of that moment lingered in his mind, the pull of her hands against his neck, the warmth of her breath grazing his skin. Left him unable to think clearly. He stepped back, slowly removing his jacket, his eyes never leaving her. She had almost driven him mad, and if she had clung to him even a second longer, the night might have taken a very different turn. Even through the haze of alcohol, his feelings had been real, sharp enough to pierce through any drunken blur. Switching off the light, He settled into the chair beside her bed, pulling his jacket over himself for warmth. Yet, even as the darkness wrapped around them, his thoughts clung stubbornly to her. And with those thoughts, he drifted into an uneasy sleep, unaware of what the next morning would bring. The next morning, Yeo-un awoke with a heavy weariness clinging to him. A sharp ache ran along his neck, as though he had slept on the cold floor all night. His gaze drifted toward the bed, empty. Hae-in was gone. The sight jolted him fully awake. Rising from the chair, he moved toward the bathroom to check if she was there, but a small note resting on a bag caught his attention. It was her handwriting. She had slipped away quietly, not wanting to disturb him, leaving a brief message, thanking him for the pad and promising to repay him. Curious, he opened the bag where the note lay. Inside were the empty cans from the night before, neatly placed. A faint sigh escaped him. He had almost wished she'd just left them scattered, as if to leave a trace of her presence. But then, his eyes froze on something lying openly on the floor. Condom. His chest tightened. He didn't recall actually buying one last night. The memories slowly crept back. He had been in the convenience store, holding it absent-mindedly. First, he thought he wouldn't need it. But then, the thought that something might happen made him decide to be prepared. Somehow, without fully realizing it, he had taken it to the counter along with his other purchases. He bent his head, embarrassment seeping through him. What must she have thought? That he was trying to turn their night into a one-night stand? The thought hit him like a stone, and frustration spilled out in a sudden, sharp cry. Nothing was going the way he wanted. The day at work passed in a fog of silence. His usual energy was gone. When closing time came, he found himself drifting toward the train station, the weight of the morning still pressing on him. And there she was, sitting in her usual spot. He walked over, greeted her quietly, and she returned the gesture. The moment felt heavy, but his mind was clear. There was something they needed to talk about. He sat down beside her and bent his head, thinking of what to say. Then he started to explain himself, but paused. Of course, all the thoughts that ran through his mind were useless. How could he tell her that what she saw was for marketing research or for exams? Stupid thoughts. The sound of the approaching train shut him up. He lowered his head in frustration. He was acting petty. Then, he decided to tell her the truth, what he really felt and wanted. He cleared his throat and started to explain himself, but she stopped him, saying she had something to say. He was nervous but let her speak. She said it wasn't a big deal. She told him she was going to avoid him for a while. Surprised, he asked her why. She relaxed and said she wasn't nervous around him. Even though she had been drunk the last time, she had been overly comfortable with him. Maybe it was because she grew up around her uncle's bandmates, but she felt she had lost caution with him and crossed a line. She looked downcast as she spoke. He was surprised and blurted out, asking if it was about the condom. Hae-in's once downcast face suddenly burst into a small laugh, which bothered him. She was actually shocked by his question, but she didn't pay much attention to it. After all, they had both enjoyed themselves that day, and they were adults. Thinking she understood him, she told him with a smirk that she hadn't expected him to consider it a one-night stand. Train finally arrived, but they still sat talking. He quickly apologized, and she laughed, saying it wasn't a big deal. Still, he wanted to know why she said she had crossed the line. She looked down in embarrassment. She was unbearable, he thought. He was surprised, it hadn't felt that way to him. She bit her hand in embarrassment, explaining how that night had felt to her. Memories came flooding back, asking him for a shirt, sleeping on his bed while he slept on the sofa. All of it seemed shameless and unbearable to her. Did she really mean those things? He laughed, still looking at her. She told him that it hadn't mattered to her while she was drunk, but when she woke up, she felt bad. That was why she had run away without saying goodbye, and she apologized to him. He hadn't expected her explanation. It caught him completely off guard. Throughout her words, she kept her hands close to her mouth like a nervous child, so unlike the bold, fearless person he had always known her to be. She was usually so unbothered by what others thought, so unapologetically herself. Yet now, in this moment, something about her vulnerability struck him. Without meaning to, he found himself thinking she looked cute. The thought made his face warm, and he quickly looked away, suppressing the urge to laugh. Her gaze met his, but she had already made a silent decision. Distance, yes, that was what she needed. It was the only way to prevent herself from repeating moments like this. For a while, she would avoid the station altogether. But his reaction was nothing like what she had anticipated. Instead of accepting her decision, he found himself resisting it, his voice rising in protest. He moved closer, as though the idea of losing even the smallest connection between them was unbearable. She stared at him in surprise, wondering why he would care so much. Scratching his head, he searched for a reason and clung to one, the unreleased song by Long Afternoon. It was something he wanted to talk about only with her, and that meant she couldn't simply disappear. Still, she remained firm, but he refused to accept her resolve. In his mind, her flaws were not flaws at all. Her wild humor, her drunken moments, her unpredictable nature. He could bear them all. He silently pleaded with her not to create a distance. The rumble of the approaching train broke the tension. She was surprised by his persistence, yet deep down, a quiet gladness bloomed. A mischievous thought formed in her mind. She decided to make light of the moment, proposing a condition for their next meeting, one that involved choosing the snacks for when they would drink together again. Her suggestion caught him off guard for a moment, until she explained her reasoning. Since their next meeting would inevitably involve drinking at his place again, she wanted to be the one to select their snacks. The idea amused him, and he agreed. The train pulled into the station at last. Hae-in rose, adjusting her guitar strap across her back. Before stepping forward, she reminded him to keep safe the item he had bought the last time. The words sent his mind to an entirely different object, the condom, and an involuntary sound of surprise escaped him. She turned to look at him, clarifying in her own way that she had been referring to the bear. Realization calmed him instantly. Without another word, they both boarded the train, carried toward their destination side by side. When Hae-in returned home, her thoughts drifted instantly to Yeo-un. Gratitude lingered in her heart. Gratitude that he had not been angry with her for what had happened the last time at his place. His forgiveness had been a relief, but it did nothing to erase the weight of her own embarrassment. Her mind betrayed her, pulling her back to that moment when she had pulled him close, too close. The memory crashed over her like an unexpected wave, and she collapsed onto her bed with a muffled groan, clutching her head in frustration. Why had she behaved like that? Why had she let herself fall asleep at that moment? Perhaps, just perhaps, if she hadn't, things might have been different. The dangerous thought opened the door to something she shouldn't be picturing, an image painted in the colors of desire. She froze, sitting up on the edge of her bed, heat rising in her cheeks. No, she should be ashamed of herself. Why was she thinking this way? She shook the thoughts from her head and reached for a distraction. Music, yes, her music. The melody she had composed earlier in the practice room could use refining. That would be her escape. Reaching for her phone, she intended to open her notes, but a new notification caught her eye, one from a name she hadn't expected at all. Sung Hyun-jae. He had sent her a message, a request for a collaboration. Her fingers stilled. Her eyes widened. And for a moment, the lingering haze of Yeo-un vanished, replaced by the quiet thrum of awe. If you're dying to know what happens next, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment if you want to see part 2. Don't forget to turn on post notifications so you never miss new uploads from us. Your support keeps the story alive, one secret at a time. Until next time.